Increasing numbers of communities and landowners and developers across North America are discovering that good community development requires a close relationship with nature. The linkage between community development and natural resources protection can be facilitated through conservation design in the development process. Many people are beginning to realize that developing subdivisions with conservation in mind is the right thing to do. There is no one more eminently qualified to talk about conservation design than Randall Arndt, author of Rural by Design, Conservation Design for Subdivisions, and Growing Greener. Randall is the nation's leading advocate and one of the foremost authorities on conservation subdivisions.
Conservation design is a concept which says basically, let's discover the important things about the property and design around them in a coordinated way that will link up with an interconnected network at the community level. It can be done at 3 levels of density. One is the normal density, and that's where I work 4.5 days a week with landowners, developers, municipal officials that are dealing with full density development proposals. The land is zoned for 50 houses, fine, let's find a way of doing 50 houses and leave half or 2/3 of the property as open space.
One such conservation development is Trim's Ridge, a 10-acre subdivision located on Block Island, off the coast of Rhode Island. In spite of its size, Trim's Ridge exhibits many of the same features as its larger cousins. The residential units are positioned so as to command a superb view of a meadow surrounded by historical stone fences and the harbor beyond. Note that the meadow and stone fences provide open space, which separates the houses from the highway. The cattle help keep woody vegetation from invading the meadow, which, together with the stone fences, will be sustained into perpetuity through the use of a conservation easement. A commons situated at the rear of the homes provides additional open space which all residents can enjoy. Approximately 70% of Trim's Ridge has been dedicated to open space through a conservation easement. The next site, also in Rhode Island, is a 25-acre conservation subdivision known as Brown's Farm. It consists of 40 single-family homes built in the mid-90s on quarter-acre lots in the village of Kingston. Through a conservation easement, 40% of Brown's Farm has been preserved as open space, consisting of fields and woods, both with public trails interconnected to other subdivisions. Tony Lakowitz, a former planner for the town of South Kingstown, now resides at Brown's Farm. He describes some of the amenities and attributes of Brown's Farm, which are specific to conservation subdivisions.
People just like to live in a small area, in a village-type setting, but it's important to have the amenities around it, like the open fields, the stone walls, which are all part of the original history, the mature trees, and areas that keep you sort of insulated from the road noise and the traffic. These features that you're looking at here, the park, the stormwater areas, the landscaping, the lighting, all within a 1 acre, or a little more than 1 acre land area, are the features you would be likely to find in a conservation subdivision where the open space areas are designed first. You look at the open space and what's valuable about it and what needs to be saved, and you build homes and streets around it. This area could very well have been designed as a cul-de-sac right up the middle of the park with larger lot homes on larger lots on the sides of the street, but it wasn't. It was the site feature, which is demanded by conservation development, was preserved right up front and was used as a part of the overall design.
On the low density end of that, we might only be dealing with 5 houses instead of 50. That's called limited development. And that can be done in areas where the property values can be so high that the landowner and the developer can attain their financial objectives by selling 5 very large parcels of ground to people that want to live in true country estates or ranches, real conservancy lots.
An example of a limited conservation development is Heritage Park Farm, a conservation subdivision adjacent to the Stroud Preserve, which is in southeastern Pennsylvania in the Brandywine watershed. John Snook, Senior Advisor to the Environmental Management Center of the Brandywine Conservancy, who assisted in the conservation design of Heritage Park Farm, explains the relationship between a limited development and open space preservation.
We're standing here on the Stroud Preserve, a wonderful conservation property owned by the Natural Lands Trust, another local land trust in this area. And this property and this preserve resulted from a variety of conservation approaches, including a limited development component, and including both the involvement of the Natural Lands Trust and the Brandywine Conservancy. If you're looking at the plan here, the limited development is the portion where the street is arcing up in a large arc. This is effectively what you might call a conservation design, and it was used by the families to create value that was balanced off against the charitable contribution value of portions of the preserve, as well as open space areas within the development which are under conservation easement. The family, as I noted, also granted conservation easements on other adjacent properties which, while not formally part of the preserve that Natural Lands Trust owns, are part of a larger preserve landscape, totaling, as I mentioned, well over 700 acres. The preserve itself is 574 acres, over some 300 to 400 of which came from Mr. Stroud, and the remainder came from portions of Mrs. Harney and her heirs' lands adjacent. This is resulting in the protection of a significant stretch of the east branch of the Brandywine Creek, as well as creating a permanent green area between the town of Westchester and the village of Marshallton to the west.
At the other end of the spectrum, instead of decreasing the density, we can increase it.
Increasing density lends itself to creating compact neighborhoods with mixed uses. This is consistent with the concepts and principles advocated by the new urbanism.
When we have a mixture of housing types, we can do wonderful things called the new urbanism, where we look to traditional architectural styles, which were very strong in small towns, say from the 1850s to the 1940s, and build villages and hamlets and town neighborhoods with sidewalks and shade trees, so you can walk to a library, walk to the shops, maybe walk to a bus stop, to a train station. These livable, walkable neighborhoods with traditional architecture, mixtures of uses, are broadly what the new urbanism is all about, and the new urbanism can be enhanced and hybridized by conservation design. New urbanism can be informed by the principles of landscape architecture, so that if we have a stone wall or a hedgerow or a great block of trees in a particularly wonderful woodland, we can design around that, as well as designing very carefully crafted neighborhoods with village greens and squares and a bit more, say, urban geometry.
In his book entitled Crossroads, Hamlet, Village, Town, Randall draws upon the characteristics of traditional neighborhoods, the principles of the new urbanism, and the features of conservation design to provide guidance to planners and developers of new villages, hamlets, and subdivisions. Robert Turner, a developer from Beaufort, South Carolina, who has built several mixed-use neighborhoods, provides insight into the ways in which conservation design can be integrated with the principles of smart growth.
The idea of a traditional neighborhood new urbanism in relation to smart growth is that in an area like where we are, as fastest growing county in the state of South Carolina, development's going to happen. It's inevitable. It's going to happen. The best we can do is to actually plan for when it does happen and try to plan in a smart growth method, and maybe And in doing that, it's probably compacting areas of development within a larger tract. If a developer purchases 300-400 acres, it's focusing on maybe developing 100 of those acres into a more village sense, and then preserving the balance in more of a greenfield. The developer can actually net out the same numbers from a development perspective because his infrastructure costs are lower. But it's inevitable that in places like fast growth areas like Atlanta and areas that are like this, I think it's a reality that it's going to happen. I think the best we can do is plan for that growth and plan and create methods that are the best methods we can possibly have. Preservation of trees, natural resources, watersheds are all really critical items in trying to develop a neighborhood, and that can be done in these kinds of models. There's been studies of developments in larger tracts that they've done stormwater management plans, and the sprawl method has far degraded the water quality versus the traditional neighborhood model. Really, I think that the key thing is to have the components of the mixed use within one neighborhood. The idea of being able to go to the convenience store, the idea of being able to go to the mom and pop shop, the idea of being able to pick up your mail, and all that being within walking distance of the residents in the neighborhood. Ideally, in an idyllic world, the idea of having your office in your neighborhood. It's interesting, I've been working on these projects for 12 years, and I've never been able not to walk to the office. And having done that, it's an amazing thing.
How does a community facilitate the inclusion of conservation design techniques in the subdivisions being proposed in order to protect existing open space and significant natural resources? The process begins with a map of potential conservation lands throughout the community. This map consists of several overlays of natural resources information. To illustrate, the Erie County Soil and Water Conservation District in the state of New York superimposed on a parcel map for the town of Eden various natural resource features. Included are inherently unbuildable areas such as wetlands, floodplains, and slopes greater than 25%. These areas are designated in dark green on the map as primary or critical conservation areas. In such areas where severe development constraints exist, development of subdivisions is typically precluded under local codes. Also delineated in orange on the map are secondary conservation areas consisting of significant resource features which are largely unprotected. Active agricultural areas are designated in light green on the parcel map. Secondary conservation areas are typically zoned for uses which are incompatible with natural resources protection and preservation. Such areas include prime farming soils, historic sites and buildings, sensitive wildlife habitats and wildlife travel corridors, scenic vistas and viewsheds, groundwater recharge areas, greenways and trails, mature blocks of forests and stream corridors, and slopes between 15 and 25%. The map serves as the tool which guides decisions regarding which lands to protect in order to secure a network of open space. As well, the map of potential conservation lands provides developers with a sense of which natural resource features the community may consider important for tracts proposed for development. The map also delineates those areas of the community where zoning changes may be needed if natural resources are to be protected. For over 40 years, the Seatman Realty Corporation, a land development company in Waukesha, Wisconsin, has relied heavily on natural resources information for its projects. John Seatman discusses the natural resources inventory undertaken by his company, which is the first step of a four-step process in conservation design.
When we go into a property, natural resources are very important to us, and that's why one of the first steps we make is to find out what those natural resources are on the property, whether they're wetlands or woodlands or important water features or waterways or upland woods, historic features, buildings, archaeological sites, geological sites, panoramic views. Those are all very important things that we can incorporate into our projects, and we do a resource inventory of those things prior to proposing a layout so that we can design around them and integrate our subdivision into those areas without destroying them. After the resource inventory is completed, we plot it on a map, and then we take the topography into consideration and the soils and the highways and views and things, put them all into one plan, and then we start the design process from there.
After locating the significant and noteworthy features of the property, the second step in the conservation design process is to locate the houses around the edges of that open space so the houses get nice views, as these houses do, back to preserved woods or forward to this large central green. So the views from the houses are a very important component of the design process for conservation subdivision design. The third element in this four-step approach is to connect the houses with a street system and with a trail system. And the fourth step in the four-step design process is to draw in the lot lines. And by proceeding in that manner, we will start with the things that are most important about the property, which add value to the real estate, add quality of life to the residents' existences, and add beauty to the community.
These are essentially the steps taken in the design of Prairie Crossing, a neo-traditional development with a strong conservation component. Prairie Crossing is one of the greenest developments in the country. It is distinguished by its extensive acreage of restored prairie and a 120-acre organic farm. The centerpiece of Prairie Crossing is Lake Aldo Leopold, a man-made lake protected from urban runoff by restored prairie vegetation and carefully constructed wetlands. Prairie Crossing, situated in Grays Lake and Libertyville, Illinois, both highly developed suburbs approximately 45 minutes northwest of Chicago, has its own railroad station, providing commuter service to Chicago. The future that faces most communities with conventional zoning and subdivision codes is the systematic conversion of unprotected acreage into wall-to-wall house lots, resulting ultimately in wall-to-wall subdivisions. More often than not, conventional zoning ordinances work at cross purposes with open space and natural resource protection goals in a community's comprehensive plan. Randall Arndt discusses how this happens.
Whatever level of government writes and adopts the zoning and subdivision regulations also writes and adopts a long-range master plan, a comprehensive plan, general plan. There are a lot of words for it. And that sets out what that level of government wants its area to look like in 25 or 30 years. All of these documents, and I've read hundreds of them in my career, talk about preserving farmland, woodland habitat, rural character, wildlife areas. Every one of them does, if they're out in a suburban or rural area. Now, interestingly, you go to the zoning ordinance, and it's as if the comprehensive plan doesn't exist. Because in the 2-acre zone, for instance, they require 2-acre lots. And in the 1-acre zone, they require 1-acre lots. In the half-acre zone, they require half-acre lots, and nothing could be more destructive of the farmland and woodlands than that approach. Obviously, if you carve up a 2-acre zone into subdivisions with 2-acre lots, there's nothing there but house lots and streets. If you carve up land in a half-acre zoning district into subdivision lots that are half-acre in size, there's nothing there but cul-de-sacs and lawns. Quite clearly, conventional zoning is a very, very destructive tool because it destroys the resources that the comprehensive plan specifically talks about preserving and conserving for future generations, for the wildlife, for food and fiber production. And communities are completely off the track of their comprehensive plans with their conventional zoning. So we need to go back and address this vast gap between what the comprehensive plan says we want to be and what the zoning ordinance says we actually are going to become. This is one of the reasons I like to classify conventional development as a conditional use. The condition that the developer must meet is just this: show us clearly how dividing all of the land up into house lots and streets in a conventional development in any way reflects the key resource conservation goals in the officially adopted comprehensive plan. It doesn't. I mean, there is no way that anybody can make a convincing argument that chopping up a farmland into nothing more than sprawling house lots preserves agriculture, or that subdividing an entire forest into wall-to-wall house lots preserves wildlife corridors and woodland habitats. It doesn't. So I'm setting up a system that actually brings the comprehensive plan back into the subdivision design and approval process, which is remarkable, because most comprehensive plans sit on a shelf, they gather dust, and you ask people what's in them, they don't even know. They may know some generalities, but let's bring it off the shelf. Every developer has to show how his development helps to implement the comprehensive plan. And if it doesn't deserve to be approved. It's that simple.
Peter Hausman, a commercial real estate developer from Pennsylvania, who currently chairs the Natural Land Trust of Pennsylvania, takes Randall's thoughts to the next logical step.
Change your land use regulations. I mean, I know sometimes it's unpopular to do because the squeaky wheel is the one that comes to your meeting and screams at what you're doing. But when you look at what's happening, if you don't change them, you destroy everything. The attractiveness of your communities, environmentally and economically.
Tony Lakowicz discusses changes in land use regulations occurring in southeastern Rhode Island.
Well, thanks to the town of South Kingstown and their planning board and South Town Council, they've changed the ordinances to require